All right, so Tulsi Gabbard, who is the former congresswoman from the state of Hawaii, Tulsi Gabbard has announced that she is leaving the Democratic Party because she is so disaffected by what the Democratic Party has done to not just the American people as a whole, but to members of the Democratic Party who were members for particular reasons. Tulsi made this announcement on the first episode, the inaugural episode of her new show. She has a new podcast. It's called The Tulsi Gabbard Show. And she says, I can no longer remain in today's Democratic Party. And this is the reason why.
I can no longer remain in today's Democratic Party that's under the complete control of an elitist cabal of warmongers who are driven by cowardly wokeness, who divide us by racializing every issue and stoking anti-white racism, who actively work to undermine our God-given freedoms that are enshrined in our Constitution, who are hostile to people of faith and spirituality, who demonize the police but protect criminals at the expense of law-abiding Americans, who believe in open borders, who weaponize the national security state to go after their political opponents, and above all, who are dragging us ever closer to nuclear war. Now, I believe in a government that's of the people, by the people, and for the people. Unfortunately, today's Democratic Party does not. Instead, it stands for a government that is of, by, and for the powerful elite. Now, I'm calling on my fellow common sense, independent-minded Democrats to join me in leaving the Democratic Party. If you can no longer stomach the direction that the so-called woke Democratic Party ideologues are taking our country, then I invite you to join me.
I don't know, guys. She sounds like a Republican to me. She didn't say that she was going to join the Republican Party. She didn't say she was going to be an independent. She didn't talk about actually where she's going to go, where her new political home is. She just said that she was leaving the Democratic Party, but I don't know. She sounds an awful lot like a Republican to me. In fact, she sounds more conservative than a lot of the squish Republican politicians that are serving in Congress right now. Imagine how many Republicans have supported this ongoing war in Ukraine. We just talked about this on the show yesterday, how the elite, not just the Democratic elite, but the Republican elite, the politicians in our country don't want victory in Ukraine. They don't want Ukraine to win the war. They want a protracted, forever war, like the Afghanistan-style war, where we're not actually seeking decisive victory and as quickly as possible. They want us to keep funding the war because it helps them enact domestic control over us. Tulsi Gabbard sounds more conservative than the Republicans who are on board with that global elitist agenda. When she talks about wokeism, when she talks about this racialized Marxism, I mean, critical race theory, you can call it, or just outright racism that the Democrats are pushing on corporations, they're pushing on pop culture, they're trying to indoctrinate our young children. Again, she sounds more conservative than a lot of Republicans who kowtow to this narrative the Democratic operatives try to use to pull the wool over our eyes. They tell us, oh, it's just teaching the reality of history, teaching about slavery and what that meant for Black people, when we know that's a complete lie. The 1619 Project or critical race theory or whatever you want to call it, however it's packaged, I should say, is not just teaching the reality of the history of our country. It's revisionist history and racialized Marxism. And Tulsi Gabbard is calling that out in a stronger way than many elected Republicans. Same with the weaponization of the Department of Justice. She calls it the security state because that encompasses a little bit more than the Department of Justice. So she's talking about all the alphabet soup agencies, this administrative state apparatus that's supposed to be focused on keeping us safe, both domestically and abroad. So all the spy agencies, the NSA, the DIA, the CIA, the FBI, all of this, the Department of Justice. This has been weaponized against not just the citizens of the country, which would be bad enough, but a specific portion of the citizens of our country. We're talking about conservatives. We're talking about Republicans. We're talking about any American who questioned the integrity of the 2020 election. We're not even allowed to question that, apparently. We're also not allowed, if we're pro-life, we're not allowed to pray outside of crisis pregnancy centers or pray outside of Planned Parenthood abortion clinics, or else the FBI will raid us like a SWAT team. How many Republicans, by the way, and I don't want to name names here, but cough, cough, Mitch McConnell, won't say anything about the way that the FBI has targeted January 6th defendants. Mitch McConnell doesn't even give money from his super PAC, which is the largest super PAC in the country dedicated to electing Republicans to the Senate. He doesn't give money from his super PAC to Republican Senate candidates who question the integrity of the 2020 election. He would rather have a Democrat serving in the Senate than a Republican majority if one of the Republicans dared to go against what he believes. He believes that January 6th was an insurrection. Tulsi Gabbard is more of a Republican than he is.